Come to order. The clerk will call the roll.
Chair Kane.
Present.
Vice Chair Gonzalez. Present. Beckley. Busey. Here. Clardy. Present. Fierro. Present. Jatan. Present. Schofield.
Aye.
Swanson.
Aye.
Yep. Good morning, members. All right, today, as usual, we're going to take up bills by non-committee members first. Good morning, Chairman Dutton, if the other is present, and then we're going to move on to bills of committee members. As reminders, if anyone wishes to testify on any of the bills we're going to be hearing today, you must register on the electronic witness information kiosk located outside the hearing room before you testify and indicate which bills you wish to testify on. Please, please, please make sure that you finish and submit the form. We'll be limiting public testimony to 2 minutes. When you first hear the timer go off, you have 15 seconds left to close your testimony. Also, if you do not wish to testify in person today, you can leave written public testimony comments through our website on any agenda item we are hearing today until the hearing is adjourned. Our members are going to move on to Representative Dutton's bill. Chair lays out House Bill 1183 and recognizes Representative Dutton to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. The question of whether a felony conviction causes a person not to be able to run for public office in Texas is still an unsettled question to some extent. Back in '97, I passed a bill that allowed ex-felons who had completed their sentences to regain their right to vote. The question then was whether or not, since they could vote, could they run for office? The statute says, I believe, they can with certain exceptions. They cannot with certain exceptions. An exception being that if they have, if there's a place where they have gotten, and let me try to read the statute to you because it's somewhat unclear because it says you have to have had your disabilities removed. What does that mean? I have no idea. And most people don't have any idea. And so what House Bill 1183 does is simply says that you have to provide documentation to show clearly that has been removed, that the disability has been removed. That's either a court document or a pardon that you can attest to. And we had a situation in Harris County where we had a candidate who clearly everybody knew had a felony. And I think the candidate just said, well, my disabilities have been removed. And that allowed the person to be on the ballot. And then we find out that no disabilities had been removed, actually. So this says you got to provide evidence that has been removed.
Okay. Members, any questions for Representative Dutton? Chair recognizes Representative Schofield.
Mr. Dutton, thank you for bringing the bill. I wish we could amend on to it that the candidate can't live in Colorado and or be non-existent.
Well, I had an experience with that. And of course, that's one of the things I said we've done a lot of work at ensuring that the person who goes to vote is the correct person. But we've not done a lot to make sure that the candidate who applies to be on the ballot is the right person too. So anyway, that's something we ought to deal with, hopefully.
All right. Members, anything else? All right, Chairman Dutton, we'll bring you back up after some witnesses. Members, anybody want to hear from the Secretary of State's office? None? All right. Chairman Dutton, come back and close if you like. You got it easy.
I close, Mr. Chairman and members. Thank you for this opportunity.
Well, thank you for being this morning. All right, is there anyone else who wishes to testify on for or against House Bill 1183? Not. The chair recognizes Representative. You've already closed. All right. If there are no objection, the bill will be left pending. Is there objection? Chair hears none. The bill is left pending. We're good. We're done, Chairman Dutton.
Oh, thank you.
You got it, brother.
Thank you.
We're
Thank
done.
you. I
got it easy.
I don't know if y'all needed something else from me.
Yeah, come on up.
No, I think I'll go have breakfast.
Okay. Chair lays out House Bill 2860 and recognizes Representative Busey to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Thank you for allowing me the privilege to lay out House Bill 2860. This bill would require counties, cities, and independent school districts to post certain election information on their respective websites, both before and after an election. At least 21 days before an election, each entity would have to post online the date of the upcoming election, the location of each polling place, each candidate for office, and each measure on the ballot. As soon as possible after the election, each entity would have to post online the results of each election and data on all votes cast, further broken down by candidate or measure and by early voting or election day. The bill also limits how many websites a user has to click through to find election results. The goal is to make sure that the data is easy and accessible to find. Thank you for hearing this bill. I'm happy to answer any questions. This is similar to some legislation we did last time, but we're extending it to other groups, and we had great bipartisan support, and I hope we can get this transparency bill through.
Yes. Chair recognizes Representative Schofield.
Sorry.
And Mr. Busey, thank you for bringing this bill. Implied in the requirement that you post certain information at a certain time is that the information be complete at that time. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that you have to do in this bill is the 21st day before the election, you have to post your polling locations. Mm-hmm. The largest county in the state doesn't necessarily always get that done on time, and sometimes it's because they have so many polling locations that there might be 4 or 5 of them where they end up getting kicked out of the building they'd hoped to be in, or things like that happen. There doesn't seem to be a provision in your bill. I like the idea of giving them a deadline, 21 days before people ought to know where they vote, and you ought to have it wrapped up by then. But is there a provision for in case something happens to a polling location that as soon as that, all of the rest of them have to be posted 21 days, but if you have a problem with one...
You mean like a timeline to make changes when changes happen?
As soon as you get the change, post it within a certain amount of time, something like that.
No, that's a good question to look at. I'd love to ask Secretary of State how they would interpret this, and then if we need to clean it up to clarify that. Mm-hmm. Helpful.
Thanks.
Thank you.
It's a great idea. Members, any other questions? If not, we're going to proceed to witnesses. The chair calls Chris Davis.
There we go. I can ask.
Go ahead, Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members. I'm Chris Davis. I represent the Texas Association of Election Administrators, testifying on House Bill 2860. Our membership has no substantive issues with this bill. We do have a question in regards to the requirement in Section 1 to list each candidate for an elected office on the ballot. Will posting of the sample ballot suffice for that? We see that being a benefit. It actually gives the order of candidates that voters would typically see on their ballot when they actually do vote. The part in Section 2 that 2A6, uncounted provisional ballots. It's a technical issue that isn't automatically generated in most of our county's elections management systems because, again, they're uncounted provisional ballots. They don't go through the system given that they've probably been rejected. It's a manual update that we need to do later on. But those are really our only 2 points that we wanted to bring up in our testimony.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Representative Busey.
No, thanks for the feedback. And we did reach out to Secretary of State, and I'll bring it when they come up. We'll try to get confirmation. I think we'll hear what they have to say, but I think the sample ballot, as long as it's up by 21 days, would meet the requirement. But we'll get their opinion on that, too.
Thank you, sir.
Chair recognizes Representative Clardy.
Thank you, Chairman Kane. And Mr. Davis, thank you for being here this morning. Just to be clear, with your organization, the elections administrators of all different sized counties, does this pose any kind of burden or unfunded mandate that's not reasonably tolerated by the various counties?
No, sir, we don't believe so. We're generally in the habit of posting this information. Cities and school districts, if they're conducting their own election, may not be well versed in it, but we're always there to help them. And I know the SOS is too, if they're running their own elections.
But it just means in the counties that I have, we'd have those sample ballots that are online. And again, they do a good job of also posting the results. So this isn't so much an elections issue as it is just information issue for the voters. So I think it makes sense. But I want to make sure it doesn't cause problems for counties on any unanticipated expense or unanticipated labor that we just need to factor.
We don't believe so, and we also appreciate that point in the bill that says as soon as practicable. We appreciate that.
Very good.
For posting that post-election information.
Okay. Chair recognizes Representative Busey.
And to the point, talking through you, Chris, we had this issue with this first version of this bill we did last session for partisan. So what we did last time, if you remember, we changed it to places that have a website. Now, there's been other legislation to get everyone to have a website, but until then, and that's what this says too. So I don't remember the number, like 15 counties don't maintain a website, and this says people that have a website have to do it. So for your burden and concern about that.
Okay. Members, any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair now calls Susana Carranza. Good morning, Ms. Carranza. I've got you as Susana Carranza here on behalf of yourself, and you were for this bill. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you.
Please proceed.
Hi, committee members. Good morning. Thank you for listening to me. I'm testifying on my own behalf and support this bill. And one of the main reasons, I'm a volunteer deputy registrar, you probably know by now. And I actively work not only registering people, voters, but also educating them. And one of the biggest difficulties is to find the right information. So any bills that promote making it easier to find information in a timely fashion is a great effort towards transparency. I encourage you to support this bill. Thank you again.
Perfect.
Any questions?
Thank you, members. Any questions? Great job. Good morning. Chair now calls Shelby Sterling. Howdy, ma'am. I've got you as Shelby Sterling. You're here on behalf of the Texas Public Policy Foundation. You're in for this bill. Is that correct?
Yes.
Please proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members of the committee. We do support this bill. If anything, this bill really does promote transparency and the sharing of information, which I think we can all agree is very important, especially when it pertains to elections, and making sure that voters have easy access to all the information so they can be well informed, know what they are voting for, and this bill does that. In particular, especially with the results being posted post the election, sometimes that gets very difficult to find. While you have some bond propositions or ballot measures that are very popular in the media or draw a lot of attention, some of the other ones down the ballot don't always get as much attention, and thus people have a difficult time being able to find whether such ballot measures pass or fail post-election. And this bill definitely helps with making sure that they understand who they're voting for, what they're voting for, and then what the end result is. For all these reasons, we do support this bill. And Representative Busey, I don't know, I was talking to your office, and I believe that she's been in contact with the SOS's office, but one recommendation we propose is that it makes sure that with the no more than 2 clicks away from the main page that apply to the pre-election posting prior to 21 days, just to make sure that all the information is in the exact same place so it's easy for people to find.
Great recommendation.
Thank you.
Members, any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, what's funny about this bill is the pre-election information is wonderful for the public. I have a feeling the post-election information is for those of us who are political nerds and really want to see those results and get very tired of waiting. It's appreciated. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on, for, or against House Bill 2860? Sir. Okay, the chair now calls Christina Atkins.
Good morning. Christina Atkins with the Secretary of State's office on HB 2860.
Chair recognizes Representative Busey.
Mr. Chairman, just to clear up some of those questions we've gotten, Representative Schofield asked about the 21 days. What if the site changes? How would y'all interpret that under this? Do we need to do something, or is it just put the change in?
Great question. I think that 21 days, that initial deadline, we would always tell people, and we tell them this now, that if they have any updates or changes to their polling locations, they just need to update that, any online listings or any publications or anything like that as soon as practicable.
Okay. And then the other question is, would y'all interpret a sample ballot as long as it meets the 21-day to meet this requirement?
I think so. I think that's actually a really good option. The clerks brought that to our attention yesterday and asked about that, and we think that that's a good way to meet that requirement in a way that's going to be consistent with what the voters will see.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Great. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
I think you're batting 100, Representative Busey, on calling up the Secretary of State's office.
They're here to serve.
Yes. If there's no one else to wish to testify on this bill, Representative Busey, you're recognized to close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I close.
All right. Thank you. If there is no objection, the bill will be left pending. Is there objection? Chair hears none, and the bill is left pending. All right. Chair lays out Senate Bill 331 and also lays out the committee substitute. Chair recognizes House sponsor of the bill, Representative Button, to explain the bill.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members. Committee substitute SB 331 revises the state law regarding voter interpreters to conform to a federal injunction that has left our current statutes unenforceable. If it passes this bill, we will ensure voters who need interpreters can designate one. Also apply the same rules to interpretation as we do to other forms of voter assistance. Also provide uniformity and clarity to voters, voter interpreters, and election officials that is currently lacking due to the injunction. By allowing a voter to select an interpreter of their choice and treating interpretation like other forms of assistance, state law will conform to the Voting Rights Act, and the injunction will be lifted. And we have several witnesses here to provide more details. But I really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Great. Yes. Thank you. Members, any questions for Chairman Budd? All right. We'll bring you back up after the witnesses.
Thank you.
Chair calls Alan Vera. All right, I get you. It's Alan Vera, Chairman, Harris County Republican Party Ballot Security Committee, and you're here against the bill. Is that correct?
Oh, you read my mind.
Oh, okay, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Is that correct, though?
That's correct.
Okay.
Committee, this bill is a verbatim rebirth of HB 1887 filed in the 2017 regular session. And our concern is unintended consequences. Translators are very important to the election. And in the big counties, the Secretary of State tells us which languages we must provide translators for. In Harris County, we have Spanish, Vietnamese, and Mandarin Chinese, and we're about to add Korean soon. Those translators go through a vetting process through the county elections administrator, and they have to be proficient in the language, duh. Then they have to be proficient in the language in election terms. They have to demonstrate that. And then they have to show that they are aware of the rules of voter assistance. The bill as filed, again, we haven't seen the substitute, places no such requirements.
Yeah. Well, the substitute, one of our issues, the substitute is before us, so it's really important that we would discuss that. And maybe you could tell us, yeah, the substitute's been laid out. We laid it out in the beginning, and so I think it's important that maybe you'd explain to us things you see as needing to be corrected in the bill. But I mean, I can give you a copy of the substitute here if you like. If I could maybe bring you back up later.
Well, I'll just lay out the cautions.
Okay.
The substitute should take into account the requirement that translators be competent in the language, competent in voting terminology, and at least aware of voter assistance rules and restrictions. The bill as filed, we have no problem with a voter bringing their own interpreter. That's not a problem at all. But of having an election judge who doesn't speak the language select an interpreter who should be competent in the language, and the judge doesn't know the language to check them, makes no sense. It's also difficult for the judge, the election judge, who's not allowed to be on the internet all day, to be able to confirm that the interpreter is a registered voter in an adjacent county. So those questions have got to be fixed.
Okay. Members, any questions? Chair recognizes Representative Clardy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Sear, for being here. I guess one of the concerns I have with the general scope, and not particularly with this bill, is there seems to be, I won't say confusion, but blending between the role of someone who's lawfully entitled to assist versus the role of a translator dealing with language issues exclusively.
Correct.
And we seem to go in and out of the laws affecting assistance versus the laws affecting translating. Do you have any thoughts or opinions on that?
No, we agree. And one of the reasons that we have, this is one of the few things we've done right in Harris County in a while, is that the interpreters are tested on the language, tested on election terminology, and then they have to pass a test on the rules of voter assistance, so they don't cross that line. In some cases now, because the requirements are strict, the Secretary of State has allowed Harris County to use translators on the iPads in the polling place to help the voter. But those translators have also been vetted and tested and proven to be correct. I think we're getting into some really blurry situations, though, between those two roles.
And that's my concern, without impugning anyone's motives, but that someone says, let me help you. English is not your native language. I'm here. Let me assist you with your language is not, I don't think, sanctioned, nor should it be, under our assistance laws. And so, again, I'm not sure where those lines ought to be, but I don't want to have language as being kind of a side door to allow improper assistance at the voting location. Is that do you think that's legitimate?
That's a valid concern.
All right, thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Schofield.
I definitely want to echo Mr. Clardy's concern, particularly about the side door. Once you start having the elections officials appointing, and to your point, you're saying the local judge in the polling place has no idea, so maybe that county, the tax assessor collector or the EA do it. I mean, the county clerk or the EA do it. But you're talking about some of your most vulnerable population in the sense that you go in there, you don't speak the language. If you need an interpreter, it means you cannot read the ballot. That's why you need an interpreter. And anybody who's been appointed by the locals can basically guide your vote, and you don't even know it. If I had to vote in French today, wherever, and I say I want to vote for this one, and they point to, I don't know. I think we need a very strong criminal penalty for guiding the voter's vote or telling the voter how to vote or misinforming the voter. And I think it's really important that we are very, very careful about what election officer we allow to appoint, because I can see a school district having an interpreter interpreting everybody to vote for the bond, and regardless of what their interest was, or voting for the incumbent school board members.
Two supporting comments to that. When we, the party, nominate bilingual clerks to work, bilingual clerks for the election, we have to send those clerks down to be vetted. They have to pass the language test, the election terminology test, and they get to be briefed on the assistance. I turned over to Fox 26 in Harris County in 2020 3 Vietnamese voters who went to vote and for whom the interpreter changed their votes on the machines. All 3 of them, and they went public with the story. Nothing was done. So the line between interpreting, I can see it being
done systematically if the elections officials get to a point.
Yeah.
And I've been opposed to these bills for a number of years for that reason.
Yep.
That it's an open door to cheating mass voters out of their votes if they don't. And again, if they could read the ballot enough to know that was happening to them, they wouldn't need an interpreter.
Correct.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thanks, sir. Members, would you like to hear from someone from the Secretary of State's office? Representative Busey? Busey, okay, you're good, all right. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on, for, or against Senate Bill 331? Hearing none, the chair recognizes Representative Budden to close on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, several of you raised a very good point. But the fact is that the law already say that the election officials, they should have the responsibility to point that if the voter decided that they cannot bring their own interpreter, okay? So if, say, an election officer tries to manipulate something, that's illegal. That's already against the current law. So it's not something new, okay? So this bill is just trying to bring the uniformity to make sure that we get over this this injunction, because as the reason we brought this bill, it's because the current statutes make it unenforceable. The fact is that no matter how diligent, how smart you are, can you imagine that, you can go through the process, if there's any illegal manipulation of the translation, whatever, like, let me say this once again, it is already illegal, okay? But in the case that, whoever, say, going through the gentleman just mentioned that his concerns, how did he know that he is picking up somebody who can speak fluent Vietnamese or whatever for Spanish or whatever? You don't need to worry about that. It's already printed, okay? But in that cases, Harris County has a lot of service. But in where my district is, it is in the Dallas County. We don't have that kind of services, okay? So ideally, yes, I would love to we would love to have everybody bring their relatives coming in. But just in case the relatives, friends are not available, please remember that the voters, they have the number one choice is to bring their own translator. What happened? The story comes back in year 2014, okay? There's a lady in Wilson County with limited English cannot vote because she was not permitted to bring her son. Her son is a registered voter, but just happened to be registered in a different county instead of the same county. So they prohibited her to vote. And later on, there were several lawsuits filed against the state, against whatever. Let me just bring one lawsuit. The Organization of Chinese American, OCA, Greater Dallas Chapter versus Texas. Federal courts determined that interpretation is a form of assistance. Once again, the federal court already decided that the interpretation is a form of assistance and placed an injunction on laws restricting a voter's choice of their interpreter beyond what Section 208 allows. And the OCA injunction has been in place in 2018, and after affirmed by the Fifth Circuit Court. Per the order, the state must instruct the county elections officials not to enforce current statute. So I am just trying to bring the uniformity together, and I absolutely understand Representative Schofield's concern. What happened if the election officials try to manipulate or whatever? How did you know he will pick up unbiased, well-qualified the person and also have the knowledge like that? But that's not the issue. Our issue is how to make it a current situation that the federal law already say that and make it enforceable, and that is all about. And
Yes.
The conclusions, I hate to see a bunch of wonderful, wonderful U.S. citizens just because they have a difficulty with the language and they don't get the right to vote, and that would be very, very sad. And you can tell last election, there's a bunch of people in my district and the neighborhood district, a lot of Vietnamese, they want to express their concerns for their country, everything. They love this country, but they come in and they didn't know they don't always have their relatives, their sons, their daughters might have to work. So the election officials did appoint the qualified people, go through the process and make sure they do the translation. And I have not heard any complaints.
Yeah,
of
well,
course,
Representative Button, I
yeah.
think all we can say is Representative Schofield kicked an ant's nest this morning. Look, I've done this a few times, maybe some of y'all out there, I've got 5 young children, and occasionally when they're fighting, I've put them in a large T-shirt, so they have to be stuck together. And I think we're going to do that with you guys, because whatever the issue on these things needs to be worked out. And no, y'all need to work this out outside of this meeting.
Chairman, we're definitely actually we're not fighting. I just want to make sure.
Oh, no, not
that,
about fighting, but I mean, the long
that,
discussions of how this bill should be written could be done before the meeting or afterwards.
Because I think we all want to get where Representative Chen is going. We just want to make sure that we're actually furthering the goal of making sure folks who have difficulty with the languages on the ballot get to cast their vote and get to have a real vote that indicates who they were for, and not what somebody who takes advantage of them thinks.
Yes, well, let's work on that outside.
I think we're all on the same exact page on that.
Yeah, let's work on that outside the hearing, though. That's why I was just trying to bring it to a close. If we could. Representative Clardy is recognized, though.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chairman Button, for being here and for bringing this bill for Senator Johnson. Maybe as an olive branch on some of this, I do note that one of the provisions in the committee substitute, some of which was brought forward, but a portion that was inserted, one of the things I think that does cure this is that there's an oath required for an assister, which I think is looking at some additional language as we go forward with that broader issue, which puts some teeth into it, because you take that oath under penalty of perjury, which gives the prosecutorial effect of being able to go forward with that. And in addition, if you're, and I think with the case you cited, you talk about assistance is kind of the broad category. A subset would be assisting with translating on the language. I know in my district, we have to get translators for Deep East Texan. A lot of people don't speak that dialect. And so, but if we could, but there's also an additional oath for an interpreter, again, that swears that they meet and that ties together with the translator. And then also there's a separate oath that they would also take as being a sister under that set of the code. And I think that may address the concerns and, again, put some teeth into it. I want people to be held accountable to work. We don't want that scene we've seen in the movies where the reporter asks the person a question, and the person from Ukraine talks to the Ukrainian translator for about 2 minutes, and then they turn to the reporter, says, he says yes. We don't want that. We don't know what's being said, so we want somebody to be held accountable that's an accurate translation. So I appreciate the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. That was excellent comments. I appreciate that very much.
Thank you, Representative Button. If there is no objection, the committee substitute will be withdrawn and the bill will be left pending. Is there objection? Chair hears none. The committee substitute is withdrawn and the bill is left pending.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, members.
At this time, I'm going to pass the gavel to Vice Chair Gonzalez. To finish them out. Go for it. Yeah, from the beginning. We were back.
All right. The chair lays out House Bill 4555 and also lays out the committee substitute. Chair recognizes Representative Guillen to explain the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, when anybody files to run for public office, they fill out an application for a ballot, for a place on the ballot. and by signing it, they swear that they are eligible to hold such office under the Constitution and laws of this state and have not been finally convicted of a felony for which they've not been pardoned or had their full rights of citizenship restored by other official action. But when someone who has been finally convicted of a felony signs it and returns it anyway, the Secretary of State's office and the state party advises that only the county party chair or a court can remove them from eligibility. In most cases, the county party chair refuses to do so or fear of legal action. So HB 4555 simply requires that when a person with a previous felony conviction files to run for public office, that they provide proof that they have been either pardoned or had their full rights as a citizen restored. And it also clarifies that failure to comply or disclose this constitutes tampering with a governmental record. The committee sub is simply a Ledge Council draft, and I can help answer any questions if y'all have any.
Members, any questions for Representative Guillen? All right, thank you. If there are no further questions, we'll proceed to testimony. We have here, do we need to call the Secretary of State, members? No? All right. Is there anyone here who wishes to testify on, for, or against House Bill 4555? Where am I here? If not, the chair recognizes Representative Guillen to close in the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If there's no further questions, I close and I ask for your favorable consideration. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Representative Guillen. If there's no objection, the committee substitute will be withdrawn and the bill will be left pending. And will be left pending. Is there an objection? The chair hears none, and the committee substitute is withdrawn and the bill is left pending. Next, the chair lays out House Bill 4530 and recognizes Representative Oliverson to explain the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. I appreciate the opportunity to lay out House Bill 4530 for you today. Members, this is a very straightforward bill, just seeking to gather further information and more transparency for out-of-state donations to political campaigns, which has been on the increase recently. It does not propose to limit donations in any way. It just requires reporting so that we can get a better sense of where money's coming from as it's coming into our state and local elections and our federal elections. And that's really all it does. And so it just creates parity and transparency with out-of-state and in-state contributions, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Members, any questions for Representative Clardy?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Chairman Alderson, for being here. I'm a little confused. I'm just thinking on my personal experience when campaign contributions are received. I don't remember anything different that we don't provide address, amount, the same information. Is there something? Am I missing something here that there's a different requirement for out of state? And first, let's focus on individuals, the natural citizens, just people, not corporations, not some other corporate entity or PAC or whatever. Just Joe Smith in Colorado wants to send Dr. Oliverson $100. Is that currently reported differently than if Joe Smith lived in Katy?
I think according to the statute, it depends on the dollar amount. But what we're seeing in particular with a lot of out-of-state online contributions is depending upon dollar amount that there is minimal, if any, information that's required to be reported. And so I think this was sort of an attempt to kind of just sort of close the loop on that and make sure that we have transparency. I guess I always wonder, like, so somebody donates $20 and, you get, or $5 and you get like 15 of those in the row. Is that 15 different individuals, or is that one person sitting at the computer just clicking the button 15 times?
Okay. Well, yeah, and I may want to, I don't know if we have a resource witness on this, but I'm mainly for my edification because, I think all of us try to follow the rules as best we can. And I don't want to, in the name of transparency, create traps for the unwary who are trying to report legitimately.
Sure.
honestly. And I know the online things, that changes some. Does your bill implicate or change any of the rules as it relates to political action committees outside of the state, or is it only for individuals?
I think it just says each person with a principal address that is located outside the state and accepted during the reporting period. Representative, that's my understanding.
Okay. And how a person is defined again? I would be fuzzy into that. How that's defined under.
And you're a much more gifted attorney than I am. I'm just a simple country doctor. I don't know.
As we are wont to do, I could argue that both ways, and probably a third. So, but again, the intent of the bill, I appreciate. We're trying to have transparency so that we know where the money's coming from and also where the money gets spent. But I don't want to create an additional burden, not just on myself, but for the colleagues we serve with and other elected officials and other offices. Because sometimes, there's some things that we have to do that requires a lot of effort. And
totally get it. And
from a transparency standpoint, the juice really isn't worth the squeeze. The amount of effort you have to put in to get it reported accurately, it's overkill sometimes in the name of transparency. So that would be my only concern. But I don't know if we have a resource witness on this bill or not.
We don't have anybody registered unless the resource witness goes and registers and then can testify.
I'm with the text ethics commission. I thought I registered.
We're not showing anyone registered. Let me see.
Can I talk to
Representative Busey?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair.
That's good questions.
Dr. Alverson, if I understand it, I'm all for this. I believe we want transparency. I think what you're trying to do, and I'm going to try to say this to Clardy via this conversation, but we already, if you get these, you have to put in the data on the back end. You want it to be itemized in public to the world, right? If it's under a certain threshold, you're allowed to kind of bulk upload that and it doesn't have to be seen. But you're saying if they're out of state and they give $25, which would be in a threshold, then you want that information to be public.
Yes, sir. That's what I'm saying. It's a sunlight bill.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. So my understanding is you have to put that in the report. Yeah, I got $10 from Travis Clardy's brother in Oklahoma. Donation, but it doesn't have to be public for, other campaigns or your opponent or whoever to see it, but it's on the back end, and I think this bill is trying to put that on the front end if it's out of state. And so the work is still being done. It's just clicking the box to itemize it so it's public, if I'm correct.
You're correct.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Members, are there any further questions for Representative Oliverson? All right, thank you. If there are no further questions, we'll proceed to testimony. The chair calls James Tindley, representing the Texas Ethics Commission, and who is registered neutral on the bill. Any questions for the witness, members? Representative Swanson?
Yes. I also had some questions about exactly what would change. There must be some aspect of this that maybe some people are getting away with not showing, but because we list each person and it gives their address and so it's going to show that they're out of state. Would this put a separate spot at the top? What would change with this bill?
So the way the law currently works is every contribution that exceeds $90 from each person needs to be itemized, including name, address, amount, date of the contribution. So if someone only contributes $90 or less, that could be disclosed as a lump sum. So that is to say, you wouldn't have the name or the address. So what this bill would do is it would make every contribution received from someone out of state itemized regardless of whether it was $90 or less. And I will also add that there was a bill last session that passed that added the requirement that every contribution received electronically, regardless of the amount, be itemized with name, address, and amount from the person.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Representative Clardy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you for being here today and clarifying this. I guess I'm struggling with this. The smaller amounts, we are not currently required to put name, address, and the detailed information because it's of a smaller amount. And I don't don't want to say the word de minimis, but it's a small enough amount that there's not a concern it's going to swing the election, that it's going to have some profound effect on the outcome or really, change the unlevel the playing field. And because of doing that, like I said, it can draw a report out from, instead of being 10 pages or 15 pages, to 30 or 40 or 50 pages. And the amount of time to go into it, when the amount of money we're talking about is relatively small in comparison. I think one thing that's happened of late with the online giving in several campaigns, regardless of party, that it does seem to have encouraged people who might not otherwise contribute to campaigns to be involved in the financial aspect of the political process to get involved, because it's relatively easy for them to go online and hit the send button for $5 or $10, or here's $25 to spread among these candidates I clicked on. But by making this burden on the candidate to then go back and have to break that apart and identify it, because what I'm saying, it could require a lot of independent research. It's not just if you have the information available. It's okay. It'd be a little bit of a pain in the butt to have to go in and break it down and do it if you have the information available. Speaking on personal experience, I've had some occasions where I've received a check and you have to go, well, is this a corporation or is this a partnership? Is this? Is when you finally you spend a lot of time tracking down for a small donation, a couple $100 or something, because you want to list it right. If we list it wrong, we're potentially subject to citation by the Texas Ethics Commission for violations of the act, and can be fined or other things, and nobody wants to do that. So I think we all, or at least most of us, make our best effort to comply. This would, I can see where this would put a burden on the candidate to really have to chase down a lot of loose ends to the point you say, this is not worth the money, and discourage candidates from taking those sorts of monies in those smaller amounts, and likewise those people being kind of pushed away from the process, and neither result seems positive to me. Do you have any concerns about that, or is there any way we could hardwire around that?
Well, I guess what I could say is that I think it is true that the candidate or the officer would have the burden of determining whether, one, this person has a primary address outside of the state, and then also reporting it if that's the case.
In current law, let's just assume that I've gotten, and let's focus on out-of-state since that's what the bill does. I've gotten 10 out-of-state contributions, and none of them are over the $90 amount. If it's a $90 or greater, you have to put in that detailed information, in-state, out-of-state. That's the threshold. But all these 10 are below that amount, various amounts. Is current law that you can get that total, have a single line entry on the report that says cash contributions below amount, and then it totals up to $390. Is that how it's done now?
Correct, and just to clarify, it's in aggregate per person, so $90 in aggregate per person. So if you have $90 from 10 different people, right, you could disclose $900 lump sum of unitemized contributions. But if one person gives you $90 today and then $1 tomorrow, you would have to itemize that person because they'd crossed the threshold during the reporting period.
And that makes sense. So it's a running total per individual, and if they give more 90, you have to disclose that individual and that amount. But I guess what I'm thinking is, would it make sense, and as a possible amendment to the bill, that there be some threshold? Because if I'm reading, let's just say, heaven forbid, I get an opponent, and I'm looking at their report, and I see a handful of 100, 200, and then I get to the bottom line cumulative total for amounts less than, and it's $50,000. I would have a legitimate concern about where did this money really come from and who bundled all this together. I think we would all have that reaction. By the same token, if the amount, either by a percentage of the total or just some flat sum, that if that amount's less than $1,000, you don't have to break it up, or less than $5,000, you don't have to break it up. Have you heard any discussions along those lines?
I have not, no.
Because I'm just trying to avoid repetitive, really kind of unnecessary paperwork. And like I said, I hate although we all want to have transparency and openness in campaign contributions, I also don't want to make it so onerous and it's a trap for the unwary, or it just puts an undue burden that chills the process of the recipient or of the giver. So, but maybe for some way we could do that, because I would think that would be the thing. If I see a big number of undisclosed contributions under the guise of it was below the threshold, that would raise eyebrows, and that's something maybe we should look into. But if it's a total of 500 or 1,000 or 5,000, not so much. And I don't know what that right numbers is, but would that be something that could be put into that would make sense from your standpoint with the Ethics Commission?
Well, I mean, in the bigger elections, right, so governor, people running for governor, you can see that number in unitemized contributions in the millions, right? And so you can have a large aggregate sum in some cases, but the law has been, it started with $50 and is adjusted with inflation for the itemization threshold, and that's been the law since the law's been on the books. So for 20, 30 odd years, since the 70s essentially, so 50 years. So it's just how the law's been. It's certainly up to the legislature if they want to change that and say, if you have a lump sum above a certain threshold, you need to itemize or change the amount of the itemized threshold for the individual contributions. But that would be something that.
If you can answer this, answer. If not, and that you say that, and I was thinking more smaller races like a state rep versus a statewide race. Can you give me an idea, just generally speaking, let's say for statewide, what the percentage of the total amount typically reported versus the amount of unallocated fund?
I could get that for you. I couldn't tell you right now. I'm not aware right now, but I could definitely get that information for you.
Because maybe that's a better threshold. You tie it to some sort of percentage where it doesn't overwhelm the total. Because that's where I would have an issue with it as well, if it skews the balance. Because if the majority of the money is coming from places we don't know where it's really coming from because it's hidden under this one line item, I have a concern. But if maybe it's 5% or 10%, some fraction of whatever the total is, so that it could slide with either office. So anyway, appreciate your input. Thank you.
Representative Swanson?
Yes, thank you. The more I hear about this, the more I think this bill is really good and very important. And I feel like any good, whether you use any system, raise the money, or any of these systems that bring in donations, that these people have to fill the stuff out anyway. So it's not hard to come up with. And if we're only asking for the ones that are within the state, that it seems really important, and this seems like something that would be very easy to do. And I'm wondering if they could even get, perhaps it's already like this, where TEC can have it where you could just load that stuff straight out of your donation, whatever you use to get your donations to come in.
We do have the ability for filers to, they have to format the CSV in a CSV or Excel, sheet,
right,
in a certain way, and if they do that, they can automatically upload their contributions and expenditures.
Okay, and so from what I've seen, they have to fill this stuff out anyway, and the bill does not include trying to find out what they do for a living and, their children's first names or anything. So it seems pretty easy to just, or totally simple to just load it in. Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you, members. Any other questions for the witness? Representative Busey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Chinley, we do this for online donations now, right? So this is really just impacting cash or credit or check donations coming from out of state? Because I think with last legislative session, we did the online, correct?
That is correct.
It's just expanding it slightly with a little more transparency.
That is correct.
All right, thank you, sir.
Members, any other questions for the witness? All right, thank you, sir. Is there anyone else here who wishes to testify on, for, or against HB 4530? If not, the chair recognizes Representative Oliverson to close on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good discussion today. And obviously, I believe in transparency. I think more transparency is good, and that's the point of this bill. I appreciate the input, and if there's no questions, I close.
Thank you, Representative Oliverson. If there's no objection, the bill will be left pending. Is there an objection? The chair hears none, and the bill is left pending. Now you yield the chair back to Chair Kane.
Chair lays out House Bill 2594 and recognizes Representative Moody to explain the bill.
Good morning, Chairman Kane, Vice Chair Gonzalez, committee. I gotta say I'm very disappointed that I'm not getting the full elections treatment because Mr. Schofield's not here. And so, although it sounded like Mr. Clardy's ready to ask 47 questions, so I'm ready for that too. Real quick. I'll try to be brief. Engagement in political campaigns has certainly evolved to the use of technology, as we all know. We're no longer just using phone calls from landlines and mail through physical mailboxes. We have now added utilizing paid services to create mass text messaging and email campaigns to encourage and support opposition to certain candidates or measures. However, the current definition of political advertising in the Texas Election Code has not been updated to reflect the use of new technology. Therefore, people can currently receive unsolicited campaign text messages and emails from unknown numbers with no legal requirement to identify the sender. House Bill 2594 would address the need to update the current code by updating the definition of political advertising to include email and text messaging. I am happy to answer any questions, but that is the bill.
Excellent. Thank you. Members, any questions?
Reserve my right to close, sir, if there's no questions.
Let's see if we got some witnesses. All right, we do have a few witnesses. We'll bring you right back up. Chair now calls Lon Burnham. All right, Mr. Burnham, you know what you're doing. Good.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members. My name is Lon Burnham, and you actually have two people testifying for this bill representing public citizen because we were unsure of the timing. But I'm going to give you a real brief history. Lon Burnham for the bill representing public citizen.
Okay, there we go. Thank you.
And the short history of this is 50 years ago this month, the Texas Legislature was racked with the controversy surrounding the Sharpstown scandal. The next session, where over half of the members were freshmen, they passed 10 pieces of reform legislation to begin that process of more transparency. Fast forward 50 years, a lot of technology has changed, and we think it's time that we have some transparency relative to 21st century communications. I, for one, am spending several $100s in municipal elections in Fort Worth using social media, and there's no requirement that the source be identified. I think that's a problem. I think this bill is a step in the right direction.
You're saying social media doesn't require it? Because I thought Facebook now does have that disclosure on.
There are ways to get around Facebook messaging, and I choose to be honorable and say who's paying for the messaging, but you can get around it, which is the reason I think you need some statutory requirements that the source be disclosed in this electronic social media messaging that we're talking about.
Okay, do you understand this bill would affect that?
I originally did. I'm not so sure upon closer investigation this morning, but it is a step in the right direction as far as dealing with transparency with all the new communication tools we have.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Members, any questions? The chair recognizes Representative Clardy.
Thank you, Chairman Kane. And Mr. Burnham, just looked at the text of Mr. Moody's House bill. There's not a committee substitute, I don't believe. Does it just say that the disclaimer that is added to
right, and there's going to be some
a publication in a newspaper that also will apply to emails or text messages, unsolicited or otherwise, that there'll still have to be a disclaimer at the bottom who it came from, and is that it?
Right, and I can give another example of anybody that spends a lot of time sending out individual emails and you're not knowing the source. You need to figure out how to do that. Whether or not this bill is going to accomplish what needs to be done moving forward, it is a step in the right direction, and obviously it's getting here in the last week of April, so we need to continue to talk about the transparency issues with new social media.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, members.
Chair now calls Andrew Cates. All right, and I've got you as Andrew Cates here on behalf of yourself.
Yes, sir.
You were for this bill, correct? Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Andrew Cates. I'm testifying in support of the bill on behalf of myself. I do have some prepared remarks, but I can also answer some of the questions, I believe. Just for a quick background on myself, I'm one of the only a few handful of attorneys in the state that focuses their practice on campaign and lobby law. In doing so, I frequently advise candidates and organizations on the nuances of Texas election law during campaign season. I did want to mention one of the questions was about social media. This doesn't specifically talk about social media in this bill. This is specifically about email and text messaging. There are already rules in place at the Texas Ethics Commission that deal with social media, and we can go into that if you want to. But generally speaking, this bill would really just require the political advertising disclaimer on paid email and paid text messaging campaigns. As I'm sure you're aware, the prevalence of text and email communications surrounding political campaigns in Texas has increased exponentially over the course of the last decade. A recent study by RoboKiller, an app that consumers use and download to help block unwanted spam text messages, found that in the month of November 2020 alone, over 3 billion political text messages were received by citizens in this state, or across the country, sorry. I can personally attest to receiving dozens of unsolicited text messages at the local, state, and federal level in the last campaign cycle, often without any attribution as to who they were from. And they often come from dummy phone numbers, which do not receive responses or which are relatively very, very difficult to track down if you're a member of the public. I would never suggest to the legislature that they should act to curtail the practice of campaigns using text messages services to do outreach to the public, but I do know that too often government regulation lags behind technological innovation, and we all have to play catch up. So this is one of those scenarios where the law is simply unclear as to the application of the definition of political advertising to paid communications by email and text messaging. There is already in Texas Ethics Commission rules a subsection about mass email communications, but it does not talk about specifically paid email communications or paid text messaging communications. And this would simply add those in. Happy to take any questions.
Great. Thank you. Chair recognizes Representative Schofield.
It would seem to me, wouldn't it, that in the case of text, your disclaimer is going to be longer than the text?
Well, possibly.
It seems like, I mean, I would want to make sure folks know where things are coming from and where the expenditures are being made. But there's also kind of weighing when you're actually starting to infringe on the ability to do the speech.
Well, so the Ethics Commission has already weighed in with rules on social media, and I think that's probably a little bit more applicable in terms of the character limit and the word limit. Twitter's got whatever it is now, 200 or something, but it used to be 140. And so there was a big concern about, well, I mean, if you have to put political advertising by blah, blah, blah campaign, that eats up most of the characters right there. And so there are already rules in place specifically for any of the character limitations so that you can either say, POL.ad by, poll ad by XYZ, whatever, to shorten it up. You can also do, I don't know how familiar everybody is with Bitly. It's a link shortening tool that you can use so that you don't have to do the full www. whatever. It'll shorten the link down really small. So you can use a link shortening tool as long as you have a link and that link directs to a page that has the disclaimer on it already. Then you don't have to put it in your communication. If that works
on text as well?
It does not right now. It specifically talks about social media and internet advertising.
I'm just thinking in terms of, if all the text says is don't forget to vote for Moody today, and you've got a disclaimer that says paid political advertising by Joe Moody for Texas campaign, Joe Smith treasurer.
But if it's got a small link at the bottom that links over to Joe Moody's campaign page where his name is at the top, it's good to go already. And I would imagine, again, I'm not with the Ethics Commission, I would imagine that they would probably do rules about the same way as they do about the social media right now. But even in statute right now for social media, none of that's in statute. It's all done in rulemaking, and it's done, talking about what the statute says and interpreting it to mean this for social media. So I would imagine it would go the same way.
And I will point out, I have not sent out any text yet saying vote for me. But, you never know.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Chair now calls Adrian Shelley. we'll get twice the dose of public citizen. Come on. You guys can pass it around. It's all good. All right, Sarah, I got you. It's Adrian Shelley. You're the Director of Public Citizen. That's who you're here on behalf of, correct? And you're for this bill.
That's right, yes, thank you. And I won't add much to what my colleague, Mr. Burnham, said, just maybe a little clarification.
He's got some institutional knowledge you may not have, so it's valuable. Yeah.
We're grateful to have him here, yes. So by changing the definition of political advertising to include text and email, you'll apply a couple of regulations, not just the disclaimer, but some other things that are in Chapter 255 of the Elections Code. Things like use of public funds, truth in sourcing, misleading and misrepresentation statements, things like that. So there's some other things you'd get as well. And then I guess the last thing I'll note is there's a study cited in my comments, the University of Texas Center for Media Engagement, which looked at the use of text messaging in political advertising and concluded that it was, quote, that it created ideal opportunities for misuse. So we think this is a straightforward bill to deal with that misuse. Thank you.
Yes, I believe it's going on. There was a campaign I was hearing about that's going on right now somewhere in the Dallas area with some really clever text messaging. It's actually kind of genius. I don't want to bore you all with the story. I'll tell you later about it, Moody. It was brilliant, though. It was well played. I believe they were hitting people's phones at about midnight. The lady being, a member of my party, and the texting saying something like, "Come out and support the Trump-loving something," blah, blah, but it was actually only targeted at Democrats, and it was turning them out really well, actually. I was like, well played. It's a genius texting campaign, and it pissed them off at midnight, right, getting a text message. So, yeah, I could see it being abused. Thank you. Members, any questions? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on, for, or against House Bill 2594? If not, Chair recognizes the Speaker, Moody, to close on the bill.
Well, I think the example you just cited is a pretty good reason to make sure that we...
Yeah, getting text at midnight regardless of what you said.
See, the old school way you used to do that is get your opponent's stuff, put it on your car, and drive it down the streets with blaring horns in the middle of the night through certain neighborhoods. And so this is just to make sure we know where communication is coming. I think Mr. Schofield's question is a good one, but I think that we can certainly, I know with Technology Day, and Bitly is certainly one that came to mind that Mr. Cates mentioned, that we can shorten this. This is not trying to become cumbersome, but I bet technology can really... We can check this box and people at least have some accountability without jamming up the character limit.
Yes, of course. Chair recognizes Vice Chair Gonzalez.
Just one quick question. With this additional requirements, do you know if it would cost campaigns money at all?
I don't think so. I mean, it does bring in some other, as the gentleman from Public Citizen said, does bring in some other requirements, right? But other than adding either the hyperlink or the shortened text to these communications, I mean, unless that costs something, then that would be it.
That's smart, using a hyperlink instead of having to go PayPal ad, blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that's probably how most people would do it. Yeah. And actually, some campaigns do it that way now because they want to direct you to what they're doing. It's just not clear whether it's required or not, so you can get all this unsolicited stuff without knowing where it's coming from. So certainly the goal isn't to add cost to a campaign, so I know they're very expensive to run campaigns anyway, but if we're sending these communications, just to add something so we at least know where we just have some transparency on that front.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Moody.
Thank you.
There's no objection. The bill will be left pending. Is there objection? Chair hears none, and the bill is left pending. Chair lays out Senate Bill 1018 and recognizes the House sponsor, Representative Hinojosa, to explain the bill.
Morning, Chair Kane, Vice Chair Gonzalez. Good to be with you early this morning. Appreciate the opportunity to lay out Senate Bill 1018. And here's what this bill does. It gives our signature verification committees or it gives our potential signature verification committees or our early voting ballot boards the opportunity to cure defects in a mail-in ballot. This bill is personal to me. My own ballot has been rejected because it was deemed that my signature on the envelope did not match the signature that was inside the ballot. And so my ballot was rejected in a presidential race when I was an early adult and moved to Austin to come to the University of Texas. I still considered Brownsville my home, intended to go back there, wanted to vote for my dad, and learned after the race, after the election, that my ballot had been rejected. The Senate sponsor of this bill, Senator Zaffarini, had the same thing happen to her son, is my understanding. So this is happening way too often. People are not able to exercise their right to vote, thinking they did it, and they did everything right, but their ballots are rejected for really often reasons that are not their own fault, because their signature maybe is viewed as not matching. So this bill would give the opportunity to correct it. It's a may, not shall in the bill. And so with that, members, if there are no questions, I ask for your favorable consideration. You should know I'm working on a committee sub with the governor's office and the Secretary of State, and we will get that to you as soon as we have that.
There you go. Well, I called Representative Schofield over to go, hey, FYI, I hear they're working on a committee substitute, so before we start asking her a bunch of hard questions, maybe we can wait to see what it does. Do you have an idea of when you need that? I know the clock is ticking, and I understand this to be a really important topic.
For the committee sub, we should be able to get that to you within today.
Okay, that would be really awesome.
Okay.
The essence for Senate bills, right?
You know what? It still matters. Thanks so much. Members, any questions? Chair recognizes Representative Clardy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Representative Hinojosa, thank you for bringing the bill. I'm just curious with your situation. So, as I understand, there's the early voting ballot board, bipartisan group that looks at the original application for registration, and then we'll look at the ballot envelope and compare the signatures. Do you know what it was about the signature that made yours look different enough that they said it doesn't count?
I think you'll hear I have my staff here who could testify that my signature doesn't always come out the same every time I sign it. It just happens to be something about me. But you know, we do have situations where people who elderly, their signature changes with time. Maybe they have a stroke. People who are disabled, or people who are just weird like me. Signature doesn't always match.
Okay, so but the intent of your bill would, and I think with the changes that will follow, so I'm going to get bogged down in it. But it's basically we'll add a step in there where people can be contacted to cure it and prove that no, this is in fact me. I broke my hand, my signature is different, or whatever it happens to be.
That's right. Okay. Or at minimum, they can be contacted, and so then they can show up in person. To vote in person instead, to relinquish their, I'm not sure I'm saying this right, but their right to vote by mail and show up in person to vote.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. We'll bring you up to close after hearing from witnesses.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Chair calls up Chase Bearden. And can you help possibly bring the mic down? Ms. Weiner. Thanks so much. Perfect. Good morning, Chase. All right, I'll guide you as Chase Bearden, the Deputy Executive Director of the Coalition of Texans with Disabilities, and you are here for this bill. Is that correct?
Yes.
Please proceed.
So Chase Bearden, CTD. This is a bill that we really have liked, and for the reason that many of our members actually run into this problem. Their signatures are never going to be the same, and currently, for those who can't make their signature the same, they tend to use a stamp. Under law, Secretary of State's office won't accept someone who uses a stamp on their ballot application or their envelope. So what that does is that forces them then to have someone else witness it. At the end of the day, they guard those things jealously. They're probably harder to get a hold of than, scribbling an X. But at the same time, we have other members who have applied One that was a doctor. He just had bad handwriting. And he didn't find out till 10 days later. And that's a problem, because I know in this committee, a big portion of this has been about making sure every vote that is a legal vote counts. And if we have problems structurally within the system that are pulling votes out, and it's being looked at by a committee of, yes, both sides, but at the same time, not giving someone the chance to say, yes, that was mine, for two reasons. First, that way their vote can count in time. And I think we should change it from may to shall, because it's everyone's vote up here. And at the same time, when that person does send in their application or their mail-in ballot, if they don't find out till 10 days later and their vote didn't count, if they actually did cast that ballot and they hear, or they didn't cast a ballot and then they hear from the signature verification board that, oh, it didn't match, that gives them a chance to say, I didn't vote by mail. So this is a way to protect many of us and make sure we can count. And we just want to make sure there is a way to cure, and that's done in a way that everyone can quickly and easily make that process happen.
That's perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. So you make it a shall and not a may, huh? Or a must. All right. Thank you. Members, any questions? Chair recognizes Representative Schofield.
And because it's a Senate bill, I haven't had a chance to really give it my thorough review. But my big concern is, it's one thing to let the voter correct. If we let the board correct, I can see in my county, red ballots may not get corrected and blue ones do. So I think it's imperative that the voter be involved in that process, or that it be mandatory that we do it uniformly for everybody, not just the ones we decide to go and correct.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jason.
And I think that's at the same time gives people that chance and that opportunity. You know, let's make it as quick as possible for all of them to cure their ballot.
And also, right now, I think a lot of people don't know.
No one knows until after the election and their vote didn't count. And that's not to any fault of their own. It's that the committee just didn't think their signature matched up enough.
And not to talk about another bill, because we can't do that, but Mr. Busey's bill that will allow you to sort of follow your ballot would certainly play some role in that, because it would tell you that they bounced it on, you know.
And it'd be great to be able to cure it directly through something like that. Thank y'all.
Great. Members, any other questions for this witness? Or none? Thank you, Mr. Bearden. Chair now calls Emily Eby.
One time I don't put good morning in my testimony. I'm actually testifying in the morning. Good morning, everyone. I'll just freestyle that. I am testifying in support of SB 1018 on behalf of the Texas Civil Rights Project.
And your name is Emily Eby.
Yes, sir.
Great. Proceed.
I am testifying in support of SB 1018. During every major election, Texas counties reject thousands of mail-in ballots solely because of mismatched signatures. In 2018 alone, more than 1,800 mail-in ballots were rejected for signature mismatch. The right to vote by mail in Texas rests on signature verification by untrained local officials who can reject mail-in ballots based on their subjective opinion that the signatures don't match. It's nothing more than a handwriting vibe check. No one tells these voters before rejecting their vote, and that rejection is final. Even worse, once a voter's signature has been rejected, there is currently no way for them to save their vote, even if they somehow find out about the rejection before Election Day and could theoretically vote in person. According to the Secretary of State, a voter cannot cancel a mail-in ballot rejected for signature mismatch. TCRP is currently engaged in a lawsuit because we believe this arbitrary process violates the Equal Protection Clause, the Due Process Clause, the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and the Americans with Disabilities Act. That we know of. There might be more. This bill would improve our system by allowing counties to inform voters of a problem with the signature on their mail-in ballot and providing a way to correct it. We would only suggest two edits. First, like Mr. Bearden, we think it should be a must rather than a shall, and not leave it up to the discretion of counties whether or not they help voters fix their signatures. Second, we think the bill should include an option for voters to secure their ballot over mail, phone, email, or fax, because many mail-in voters cannot come in person to correct the error because of age, disability, confinement in jail, absence from the county, the reasons they're voting by mail in the first place. Thanks.
Okay. Members, any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair now calls Glenn Maxey. Good morning, Mr. Maxey.
Good morning, Glenn Maxey, Texas Democratic Party. Here strongly to support this bill. I'll not be redundant. And I will say that for once, I can say that we will agree with the governor's office that the committee substitute. We would like to see it say shall, and also it does need a deadline about when the people could do this, with how long it takes to do the notice, and how long they have to cure. But putting the deadlines in will make it a stronger bill, and we strongly support it. Thank you.
Perfect. Members, the chair recognizes Representative Clardy.
Thanks, Chairman Kane. Mr. Maxey, sounds like you've been involved in those conversations with what may be the...
Please, real quick, though, guys, we didn't notice this one. Please.
You mentioned deadlines. Is there any, do you anticipate any language that will move the date forward where the ballot boards can meet sooner to look at, where they can look at early vote earlier and compare those signatures? I'm worried logistically about the timing. One is there enough time to go through them to give people an opportunity to come in and cure, which I think I certainly support that. Then secondary to that, does the proposed language contemplate we need to make it as easy as possible on that board to be able to contact those individuals? And I don't know whether the individual, whether an email, a mobile phone, some way to have that near instantaneous contact. We have a problem with your ballot. You need to be here in the next week. But just, we got to have time to do it. It's the right thing to do, but how do we notify them and how do we get it done in time? Can you address that?
Well, this is always a problem because all of this is done toward the end of the process. In the major counties, the signature verification committees are typically beginning to look at them 12 days out to do the verification. The current law has always been that the early voting clerk could make a notification by mailing it back, but no early voting clerk is looking at these anymore. It's going straight to signature verification committees, and once they've turned it over to the committee, they no longer have the ability even if they find the error. So this corrects all of that. The time frame, I think, that it's looked at in the committee substitute and talked about is to allow people to cure the same period as provisional ballots can be cured after the election and overseas ballots coming in. So it's not extending longer for the committee to have to do something on the back end. I don't think anything's in here having people start earlier. That's a different conversation.
Would there be a problem with them starting earlier? I mean, why couldn't they start earlier? I mean,
I don't.
Early ballots come in at a certain time, particularly for the I won't say major counties, but the mid-sized to larger counties.
I would think the election administrators and clerks would have more opinion about that question about when they need to start. I tend to agree with your point that when ballots are coming in as early as 1st of October. Ballots are being mailed at the end of September typically. If they could start earlier,
right?
If they had the option to do that earlier.
And it would just seem to be on ballots, you'd need to provide current email, and it could be optional. You don't want to have your chance to cure, you don't have to put your email, you don't have to put your mobile phone, but if you want to make sure you're notified, you can put that on there and send it back.
Yes, this bill anticipates that there are places on the Secretary of State's application today, there's a place for both a phone number and an email optionally, and this bill would allow people to do it by phone, email, or to mail it back to them if they get it, the 1st of October and see that it's not signed.
This committee and other committees, we have a tendency to think high-minded policy. We don't ever get down in the weeds, rubber meets the road, logistic, mechanical. How's this really going to work? And you think the current sub you've seen does that?
I think this is a great step, and then once we are doing cures, we can figure out if we need to fix it the next session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The chair recognizes wait, real quick though, this is important. Please let the record reflect that Representative Beckley is not present. The chair now recognizes Representative Beckley.
So do we know how many statewide of these ballots are being thrown out? Because we've been trying to dig that out, like that are not like signature, and the number one reason is signature matching, but there's not an easy way to find that out. And we've had everything from 2% to 20% per county in here. Do we have any idea of what that number is? I mean, these are actual votes that are not counting.
I think I heard the number that in 2020 there were 8,000 ballots rejected out of all the mail ballots that were.
So 8,000. I think I heard 8,000 as well, but we have to go county by county, and not all the counties have all the notes. So my office is going through it, trying to figure it out, and then what the reasons are. And some counties say they don't. So we have no consistency with how counties are reporting all of these issues, which is also a big problem. So we might want to amend. We may want to put an amendment on some of these bills to make it consistent that how the counties report, so that we can.
And I think the thing, it's not just signature mismatch. The biggest problems are where elderly people just fail to see that they're supposed to sign it at all. And so there's no signature at all. And then the second thing is any person who requests a mail ballot within a county who has asked it to go to a new address because they've moved within the county are required to put in a second piece of paper, which is a statement of residency with their mail ballot. And because in a mail ballot package, there's about 5 pages of instructions, many seniors don't see that they need to do that because, and then this is the answer I've gotten on the phone all the time, I didn't know I was supposed to do that because they mailed it to the right address, so they know I'm at this new address. Why did they ask me to give them something that says I'm at this new address? So it's the failure to put in a statement of address is one of the bigger problems people have because they obviously think that they've already done that.
Yeah, so like how many of these do we think has happened? Like, so that's just 2020, and so 8,000, but do you think the number could be higher? I mean, we're having a hard time figuring it out. Like, we've requested all of it in our office.
I do not know.
Yeah, and so nobody's keeping track of it. Yeah, and do you think that, like, we should add to this bill, like, that the counties have to report a consistent way? Or something like that. You understand what I'm saying? Like, because that's the problem that we're finding with all the data.
I would love to add a lot of things to this bill, but I want to make sure it passes this session.
Gotcha.
Incremental. Incremental.
To stop now.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. We do have to go to the floor. So sorry to all the witnesses, one moment. So, Representative, so I'm going to leave this bill pending and we'll finish it up off the floor. So, heads up, witnesses will be coming back, I guess, later, and I have no idea how long today may take. But if there is no objection, the bill will be left pending. Is there objection? The chair hears none, and the bill is left pending. Members, we're now going to go into a few votes. First up is going to be House Bill 740 by Representative Fierro. So if everybody's ready for that. Yes. No, one moment. All All right, the chair lays out as pending business House Bill 740. Members, is the bill we heard previously relating to preferential voting and runoff elections for certain voters voting by mail. Representative Fierro offers up a committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? Chair hears none. Substitute is adopted. Representative Fierro moves that House Bill 740 as substitute be reported favorably to the full House with a recommendation that do pass and be printed. The clerk will call the roll.
Chair Kane.
Aye.
Vice Chair Gonzalez. Aye. Beckley. Aye. Busey. Aye. Clardy. Aye. Fierro.
Aye.
Jatan.
Aye.
Schofield.
As much as I love working with the author, no.
Swanson. We're on 740.
There being 8 ayes and 1 nay, the motion prevails. We're now moving on to Senate Bill 1387, which is as a companion. We did the companion recently, and then after that will be House Bill 2860 by Representative Busey. Chair lays out Senate Bill 1387 by Senator Creighton. This is the companion to House Bill 1314 by Hefner. We reported it favorably. House Bill 1314. This is Senate Bill 1387. It's identical to a bill you supported last week, sir.
Actually, it's now sponsored. I had the opportunity to lay out the bill.
Read.
One moment. Can we proceed? Okay. Senate Bill 1387 is a bill relating to a requirement that a voting system used in election parts would be manufactured in the United States. Representative Clardy moves that Senate Bill 1387 without amendment be reported favorably to the full House with a recommendation that it do pass and be printed. The clerk will call the roll.
Chair Kane.
Aye.
Vice Chair Gonzalez. Beckley.
No.
Busey.
No.
Clardy. Fierro.
No.
Jatan.
Aye.
Schofield.
Aye.
Swanson.
There being 5 ayes and 4 nays, the motion prevails. The chair lays out as pending business House Bill 2860 by Representative Busey. Members of the bill we heard previously relating to, this doesn't tell me anything. There we go. It's relating to a county or city or independent school districts posting certain election information on an internet website. Great bill. Representative Busey moves that House Bill 2860 without amendment be reported favorably to the full House with a recommendation that it do pass and be printed. The clerk will call the roll.
Chair Kane.
Aye.
Vice Chair Gonzalez.
Aye.
Beckley.
Aye.
Busey.
Aye.
Clardy. Yes. Fierro.
Aye.
Jatan.
Aye.
Schofield.
Aye.
Swanson.
Aye.
There being 9 ayes and 0 nays, the motion prevails. All right, members. Chair now lays out Senate Bill 7 by Senator Hughes. Members of the bill relating to elections, including election integrity and security, creating criminal offenses, spreading civil penalties. Chair offers up a committee substitute.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Can you walk us through the committee substitute and all the changes from SB 7?
Of course. The committee substitute is identical to a bill that you voted on recently, 2 weeks ago.
Which bill was that?
The bill is House Bill 6.
In full?
In full.
SB 7's been gutted. House Bill 6 has been put.
I wouldn't say that, but House Bill 6 is on the bill. That's correct.
Can I ask, in the committee substitute, does it still have the provisions around filming for poll watchers?
The committee substitute is identical to House Bill 6.
Was that a no?
It's identical to House Bill 6. Did House Bill 6 contain that? It did not.
Mr. Chairman, I feel that SB 7 is a significant piece of legislation that we should hold a hearing on it.
I agree, but we are doing a committee substitute to match it to House Bill 6, and we've already heard a complete hearing on that exact language. So,
So no, we won't be having a hearing on it.
we've already heard a hearing on House Bill 6, and so that's sufficient. Thank you. All right.
Chairman, I agree with Representative Busey.
Okay.
I mean, these two bills are substantially different. You have said that time and time again in committee. You have many times that you have said that these bills are totally different when somebody compares it to SB 7. I mean, so I have to object. I mean, this is wrong. We deserve to have a public hearing on this, and so I'm going to object, and I'm going to offer three amendments. I'm going to offer 3 committee amendments. So,
isn't the language in the committee sub the exact bill we had a 22-hour hearing on?
We got no notice
got
on this.
the committee sub
like literally
seconds ago.
Come on,
It's
man.
the same thing. So
No, it's not.
Yes, it
This is absolute crap.
It's the same thing. It's okay.
Haven't you said many, many times that your bill is different from SB 7?
And you've already read my
And
bill.
didn't the speaker say the same thing?
House Bill 6 is now on Senate Bill 7. We've had a hearing on it.
We
Thank
don't
you.
know. You just gave it to us.
All right.
We do not trust that.
Is there
This is a
objection to adoption of the
deviation. Oh, no,
committee
and this is
substitute?
a deviation.
The chair hears none, and the substitute is adopted. The chair moves that Senate Bill 7.
I said that
as
I'm going to offer 3
substituted-
committee amendments as well, Chairman.
Okay.
Okay.
The chair moves that Senate Bill 7, as substituted, be reported favorably to the full House of a recommendation that do pass and be printed. The clerk will call the roll.
Chair Kane,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gonzalez,
Nay, but I have the committee
Beckley?
substitutes, or not committee, the committee amendments.
We're in the middle of voting.
Busey,
So you're not going to recognize the amendments that I offered?
Clardy,
It's bullshit.
Fierro,
I believe I heard about it.
Yeah.
We're not addressing.
All right. So we'll be doing this after the floor. Okay, so the chair moves, withdraws the committee substitute to Senate Bill 7. And leaves the bill pending. All right. Chair moves to correct the minutes from the hearing held on April 8th, 2021. Is there objection? Hearing none, it is so ordered. All right, members, we need to go to the floor. Is there objection? The chair hears none. Without objection, the committee will recess until final adjournment or recess in the House today or during the period authorized for reading and referral of bills if permission is granted by the House. The committee stands in recess.